Hi everyone, welcome to today's video. My name's Stephanie and today I have not one but two upcoming collections to share with you all from ILNP. I also want to give a big thank you to ILNP for sponsoring this video. I am so excited to share that because as I'm sure you all know, ILNP is one of my favorite brands, so this is just really exciting for me. But as usual, my review will be 100% honest and my own, the same as with my non-sponsored videos. So first up we have the Playground collection, which is a 6-piece lineup of these mixed finish formulas in these really bright, colorful shades. And then we have this quad of their new studio color polishes for the Brunch collection, which have a much softer, sort of muted pastel vibe. So as usual, I will save more of my thoughts for the end of the video after comparisons. For now, let me show you the swatches. The first polish we have in the Playground collection is called Scribbles, and it's described as a sky blue with a blue metallic flaky and a scattered holographic sparkle. This is an ILNP's speckled finish, so you might have seen these polishes before where they're crelly bases with these metallic little flakies. As you saw, the formula on this was pretty good. I would say it wasn't the most even or self-leveling on the first coat, but it is very highly pigmented, more of this crelly cream kind of base, and it pretty much built up to be fully opaque in just 2 coats. If you're familiar with my ILNP reviews, you might know that I'm not the biggest fan of their speckled finish polishes. I couldn't tell you why, because I do think this polish is super cute in the bottle, but there's just something about it that I don't love on me, but I do really love the base color. That sky blue is so beautiful, and I honestly love how the flakies kind of look like colored pencil shavings, so it just really plays into the name so well. The next shade we have is Caterpillar, and this one is described as a deep green jelly with a scattered holographic flaky. This one, as you know, is in my favorite finish from ILNP. I just love these jelly bases filled with these scattered holo. I think they look so stunning, though I'm not sure if I would agree with calling it a flaky in this one. It just looks very finely milled, kind of like a fine dusting. And while I'm not always a fan of this Kelly green sort of shade or hue, I did end up really liking this one. I think there's something about it that's just so cute and perfect, especially with the name. The formula was also fantastic, a little bit sheer on the first coat, but it does build up beautifully on 2 coats, especially since it is a darker color. I think most people with shorter nails could get away with it in just 2, or of course you can do a 3rd coat if you really want to up the coverage and deepen the color a bit more. For my full hand swatch though, I am just showing the 2 coats in bright indirect lighting, and I had a hard time seeing any visible nail line. Even though this is a jelly, I didn't use a blurring base for this one, so yeah, I think it looks pretty solid here. Next up we have Peekaboo, and this one is described as a sunny yellow jelly filled with yellow iridescent flakies. So I'm not gonna lie, I was a bit nervous at seeing this one because I know ILNP has given us similar iridescent yellow jellies before, and they honestly just weren't my favorite, so I was worried I wasn't gonna like this one, but I actually thought this ended up looking really bright and beautiful on the nails. Since it is a yellow jelly base, it is going to be a bit sheer on the first coat, so I personally wouldn't wear it in just the one, but building it up in 2 already intensifies that bright yellow color. I feel like it's a pretty true primary yellow. I think the difficult or tricky part with yellow iridescent flakies is that they can sometimes lean a little green or blue in the shadows, so that can kind of affect the coloring, and I personally like my yellows to be very yellow and not green leaning, so I think this does a good job at being yellow. And since this is a little bit of a lighter jelly kind of color, I did use 2 blurring bases. On my middle finger I'm wearing Polish for Days Briar Rose, and on my ring finger I'm wearing Polish for Days Cotton Candy, which is the more pink tinted one. Briar Rose is more of the neutral color, so it kind of neutralizes the warmth of the yellow base, if that makes sense. It's not a warm leaning yellow, but it just dulls it a little bit more than I would like, so I do prefer this with Cotton Candy. Then we have Recess, which is a primary red jelly filled with red to orange iridescent flakies. And I would say that is pretty spot on. This is a very bright primary red. It has a gorgeous formula, super even coverage on the first coat, as you can see, just sheer as expected since it's a jelly. I would say there's a good balance of the amount of flakies in here in relation to the base, where it might look a little sparse on the first coat, but obviously the more coats that you do, the more flakies you'll get. But I wouldn't say they obscure the visible nail line the same way that other polishes do. So on the two coats here, I feel like I could see a lot of visible nail line. It maybe didn't pick up on camera as well, so I still ended up doing a third coat and the nail line was a lot more obscured here. Obviously there's a ton more flakies too, so you could wear this in 2 or 3 coats depending on your preference. You might also recognize this finish from other collections like the After the Rain or Overcast collections from the previous years. This is basically just the primary red version of it. And while I love those other 2 collections, I don't think I love this one on me. I think there's something about the flakies that just don't stand out in the same way. I think it's very low contrast, so the flakies get a little lost in the base, but they do stand out a bit more in lower lighting as seen here. ILNP is giving us another magnetic in this collection, but only one, and it's called Adrian, and it's described as a deep azure blue with an icy blue magnetic pigment. This one had a super gorgeous formula, very highly pigmented, slightly on the jelly leaning side, which means it magnetizes super easily. And since it's somewhat of a darker shade or a medium to dark leaning blue, I found it to be perfectly opaque for me in 2 coats, but if your nails are longer, you might need a third. I thought it looked really great in 2 coats, especially in the cat eye effect where you would normally see the most visible nail line, but here it's very obscured. I love the contrast between the magnetic and the base color. It's just so striking. But of course, my favorite is the velvet effect, although I would say maybe a new favorite is the glass bead method, which is what I wore on my pointer finger. It was a little hard to capture the magnetic shift in this angle, so I had to let go of the bottle for it and twist my hand around, but it was so mesmerizing once I was able to capture it here. I think it's just so beautiful. I normally love when ILNP includes the extra hollow flakies in the background, so I was kind of missing that with this shade, but I do think it is a stunning color on its own, and it magnetized beautifully, which is what you would expect from a magnetic polish, which, by the way, I forgot to mention, I'm wearing the velvet effect on my middle, cat eye on my ring, and unmagnetized on my pinky. And rounding out the playground collection is Building Blocks, and this one is described as a creamy beige with red, yellow, green, and blue metallic flakes. This is in the same speckled formula as Scribbles and other ILNP shades, and I know I said I'm not the biggest fan of this formula or finish, but I really love this one. I just thought it was so cute. I'm pretty sure it's because of the little rainbow metallic flakies, which I also don't think I fully agree with the description being metallic. I almost would call these matte. Maybe it's because of the creamy, crully base that sort of covers some of the shine, but they just didn't have that metallic shine that other metallic flakies do. Either way, this had a stunning formula, similar again to Scribbles, where the first coat maybe doesn't look super impressive, but this is definitely not meant to be a one coater by any means, and it built up beautifully and opaque in 2 coats for me, though again, if you have longer nails, you might need a third because this is a little bit of a lighter shade. Also, something to note here, I'm doing 2 coats on every nail, but you can see that some nails are a little bit more sparse with the flakies, and that's kind of my main gripe with these speckled formulas. And here is my full hand swatch collage of the Playground collection, wearing 2 coats each with top coat and shown in bright indirect light. I really wish I had direct sunlight for these because I feel like it would make the colors even more vibrant and intense, but they're still really fun. Moving on to the Brunch collection, the first shade we have is Patisserie, and this one is described as a warm coral. I think it's actually capturing pretty color accurate as far as the coral goes, though when I first opened up this polish, I thought it looked really familiar to a pink we saw very recently from ILNP, though they are very different, which you'll see in the comparisons later. There's not much to say about the formula. It is a really stunning, fluid, crelly leaning cream, I would say. At least I noticed that this one was the most crelly leaning out of the four, but it's still super high coverage, very highly pigmented on the first coat alone, and fully opaque in just 2 coats. I thought this looked great on my full hand swatch, again in 2 coats with a glossy top coat, though I did notice that on my nails it dries down a little bit darker than what you see in the bottle. I think in the bottle it looks a little bit more muted or white based, if that makes sense. So I thought that was interesting, but again, still a very pretty shade. Next up we have Pistachio, and this is a soft pistachio green, and I would put the emphasis on soft. For whatever reason on camera here it's picking up a bit more vibrant or saturated than how I'm seeing it in real life, so just picture this being a little bit more muted or subdued in color. That being said though, the formula was phenomenal. It was just so incredibly pigmented on the first coat alone. Honestly, almost a 1 coater. It is just super full coverage, but I still ended up doing 2 coats. And honestly, since this one is so creamy and pigmented, I could see some people maybe thinking this one is a little thick, so you might need a drop or 2 of thinner in this one and the following 2 shades. I personally like a slightly thicker formula, but I didn't notice that this was difficult to work with or super chalky or anything, so it's still leveled out nicely, but maybe the more that you use it, the thicker it'll get. Then we have Short Stack, which is described as a soft maple beige. I love the description on this one because I just would have called this a beige. It seemed pretty boring, you know, nothing super special, but there's just something so comforting and cozy about it being described as a soft maple beige. Like I already mentioned, this one had another super creamy, highly pigmented formula on the first coat alone, and it was fully opaque in 2 coats. I can't imagine people needing a third for this, even if you have longer nails, though I guess it depends on how thin your coats are. But yeah, this is a nice neutral kind of shade. Maybe not my favorite, especially as a full hand manicure. It's not quite close to my skin tone, but it's still giving me those uncanny valley vibes, you know. It just looks a lot like foundation but on my nails, so I don't love that, and it's a shame because I do love the name and the inspiration, so it's just a bittersweet thing. And rounding out the Brunch quad is Ube, which is a milky lavender. And even though it's described as milky, that's just pertaining to the color, not the actual formula or finish. As you can see, this is another super creamy, highly pigmented, full coverage formula where if you're in a rush, you could probably get away with this in 1 coat, but for the sake of the video, I am doing 2 coats. I would say this is picking up pretty color accurate. Maybe it is looking a little bright, but it's not that super crisp whitened lavender. There definitely is a gray undertone going on, but not gray enough that it pulls it into a winter lavender, if that makes sense. Though I would say this is a really great transitional shade going from winter to spring. And here is my full hand swatch collage of the Brunch collection. Definitely love the soft, springy vibes that this one has. Moving on to comparisons, I'm starting with Scribbles, and I first wanted to show this next to Oasis and Low Rise, mainly for color reference, so you get an idea of the shade of blue that Scribbles is. Oasis is a much brighter, minty aqua kind of shade. It's also a pure cream, while Low Rise is a little bit dustier, more of a denim blue jelly. I thought the sky blue base of Scribbles was going to be really close to Olive Ave's LA Looks, but that one's a bit too dark and maybe a different shade of blue as well, so definitely not dupes. And also for reference, here it is next to Cracked Polish's Out of the Blue, which was their Jelly of the Month that just came out. That one is a little bit more cornflower leaning, so I think the closest shade to the base of Scribbles is Mooncat's Sinking Feeling from their Technicolor Dreams collection. It's basically a sky blue cream, and seeing them side by side, there is still a difference. I would say that Mooncat is a little bit more of a whitened base, but it's the closest that I have. Then for Caterpillar, I of course am showing this next to Jellybean from last year's spring collection. It's another green jelly with hollow sparkle, but that's so much brighter. It is nowhere near a dupe. I would say the closest that I have to Caterpillar is Cirque's Kelly Jelly, which, as you can see, is really similar in the bottle, but if you're familiar with Cirque's jellies, the darker ones especially tend to be a bit more sheer, so doing 2 coats of each, you can see that Cirque is a lot more sheer, so therefore a little lighter looking. If you want it to be a little closer to Caterpillar, I would recommend doing a 3rd coat of Kelly Jelly, as well as, of course, adding a hollow sparkle like China Glaze's Fairy Dust or Mooncat's Moon Dust, for example. It's not an exact dupe, but definitely duping the vibes. Then for Peekaboo, the only bright yellow that I still have from ILNP is Funshine Smoothie, which is more of a linear holographic formula, so usually the holo will add a little bit of this gray cast, but Funshine Smoothie also has this warm golden sort of shimmer as well, so it is still a bright yellow, but not as bright as Peekaboo, where the iridescent flakies in that are super glowy, so that made me think it's probably going to be closest to Sunburst from a couple of summers ago. Unfortunately, I destashed mine and I only have the swatch stick of it, so you can see there is a super similar vibe. I think the base of Sunburst is maybe a little bit more sheer, or there's something about the flakies that just don't glow in the same way, or you just see more of the shadow of the flakies. There's just more of this gray kind of coloring in its Sunburst, and honestly that's why I got rid of it, though I would say Peekaboo is what I wanted Sunburst to be. And of course, I am also showing Peekaboo next to Mooncat's Demeter's Harvest, which is another vibrant sunshine yellow jelly base, though this one is filled with more of a green shimmer. And honestly, it's so glowy that it can be pretty overpowering, kind of making it lean chartreusey in most lighting, so I do appreciate that Peekaboo is more of a true yellow. Next for Recess, I first wanted to see this next to Secret Santa from last year's holiday collection because I thought they were just giving a similar vibe between the red base and the golden sort of shimmer, though on the nail you can see that Secret Santa is a little bit deeper in the base color and the shimmer is much smaller. And for reference, I did also want to show this next to Cherry, which is just a red crelly, but it's honestly nearly identical. Like maybe Cherry is a little bit darker, like a shade or two darker, but I thought it was pretty much the same color, and I decided I might as well try to recreate Recess, so I used Holo Taco's Lunar Unicorn Skin, which is the golden iridescent flaky. Doing that as a topper is just too much contrast, so to mute it, I decided to do a little jelly sandwich with Cherry, and I had to do a super thin coat, but I was honestly really surprised at how close this recreation was. I also wanted to show Recess next to my swatch stick of Ariel, which was from a previous summer collection. It is another red jelly base that does have iridescent flakies, but they are much smaller and more densely packed together. And lastly, I'm showing Recess next to Mooncat's Shroomdom, which is a red jelly with golden iridescent flakies. Though, as I'm sure you can probably tell from the bottle alone, the flakies stand out a bit better or just easier in Shroomdom. There might be slightly more of them, but I feel like you can see the gold color of them a bit easier. So they're not exactly dupes, but similar. Moving on to Adrian, I knew I had to show this next to 0 Degrees, which is another blue magnetic from ILNP. I think they might have a similar magnetic shimmer being that icy blue, but the base of 0 Degrees, as I'm sure you can tell, is a bit darker, more of this slate blue kind of color. It's not as vibrant as Adrian is, so naturally I had to show this next to Starrely's Oceanic Moonlight, which is a super vibrant cobalt blue jelly. It does also have this extra blue shimmer in the background, which makes it a little bit brighter. Next, for building blocks, I actually thought this was pretty similar to ILNP's Afterlight, which came out a few summers ago. It has a really similar beige, crelly kind of base, but Afterlight has more of these golden metallic flakies, obviously instead of the rainbow flakies, so they're not dupes by any means, but I thought the bases were kind of close color-wise. To add the rainbow flakies, I figured I could add a layer of confetti on top, which is their rainbow metallic flaky. It is a little bit more of that true metallic look though, and a lot more dense compared to what's in building blocks. For some other cream comparisons, I wanted to show building blocks next to Soulmate, which is more of a lighter ivory color, definitely not as beige. Here it is next to Short Stack from the Brunch collection, which kind of looks similar, especially in the bottle, but on the nail it is a shade or two darker, so I would describe these bases as me and me in the summer, where they're both beige. And again, I wanted to do a layer of confetti on top of Short Stack just to sort of recreate the vibe. Moving on to the Brunch collection, we're starting with Patisserie, and I wanted to show this next to Blossom, which I thought was going to be somewhat close, but you can see Blossom is that true rose sort of color, and Patisserie is more of that terracotta shade with that warm coral sort of undertone, so that made me think of other shades like Holo Taco's Low-Key Blushing and Olive Ave's Terracotta. These three look deceptively similar here. Maybe you can see that Patisserie is a little bit lighter than these two, but on the nail there is still a slight difference between them, where I would say Holo Taco is the most pink leaning. It doesn't have nearly as much orange as the other two shades. Olive Ave is definitely the closest in terms of that orangey terracotta color, but it is a few shades darker. Next, for Pistachio, I wanted to quickly show it next to Secret Garden, which was the light green from the Flower Shop quad for Valentine's Day. That one's more of a blue leaning green, as you can see, so definitely not dupes. For this more yellowy leaning green, I pulled out a couple of Olive Ave shades. I have Terre on the left and Scape on the right. Unfortunately, neither of these are around anymore, but I would say that Scape is really close. It's just a couple of shades lighter. I did also want to show this next to a couple of Holo Taco greens for reference. Here it is next to Not Pressed, which is a much more vibrant olivey green. Hopefully you can see how muted Pistachio is. So that made me think it might be similar to Matcha Maker, and I would say they're kind of close in value, but they're just different shades of green altogether, so definitely not dupes. Next, for Short Stack, I first wanted to show this next to Soulmate and Fleur, which are just other light kind of cream shades. Soulmate is more of that true ivory, and Fleur has a little bit more of that pinky tone. Since Short Stack is more brown leaning, here it is next to Chocolate and Mushroom. Chocolate is obviously a much deeper milk chocolate kind of brown, and Mushroom is a little closer in terms of value, but more of this taupey color, where it's a little bit more gray leaning compared to Short Stack. So I thought the closest shades that I had were ILNP's Undercovers from their Snow Day collection this past winter, as well as Color Department's Blank Canvas, which I don't think they're selling anymore. Undercovers is a couple of shades darker, so I ended up not comparing it on the nail. I decided to just do the Color Department since it looked really similar in the bottle, but on the nail they are super different. Blank Canvas has a little bit more of that taupey undertone again. So remember how I said Short Stack gave me those Uncanny Valley foundation vibes? Well, I knew I had to show this next to Olive Ave's Limestone, since that's exactly what I said about this Olive Ave shade when I first swatched it. I thought these were going to be dupes just seeing them side by side in the bottle, but on the nail, Olive Ave is a few shades darker and warmer. And lastly for Ube, I wanted to show it next to Mittens, which was the really grayed out pink from the Snow Day collection this past winter. So you can see they're kind of close in value, but Mittens is a bit more pink, not purple at all. When it came to the more lavender purple from ILNP, I immediately thought of Butterflies from a Valentine's Day collection a couple of years ago. That one is much brighter, more white-based and vibrant though. For another pastel lavender in my collection, I have Holo Taco's Serial Killer, which, as I'm sure you can tell, is a lot more vibrant, again, more white-based. It's not nearly as dusty or muted as Ube is, so I'm pretty sure Flower Child would be an even closer comparison, though that one is a bit warmer toned if I remember correctly. And while I also don't have this one in my collection anymore, I still wanted to show a photo of Olive Ave's Artie, which is another super grayed out lavender. This one is more cooler toned than Flower Child, so I think it's closer to Ube. So that wraps up my swatches and comparisons of ILNP's Playground and Brunch collections. Both of these will be launching this Friday, February 27th, so I will have ILNP's website linked down below. But yeah, I would love to hear what you think of these because I thought they were pretty nice. Starting with the Playground collection, the theme is definitely very cute and I would say really unique. At least I can't think of another collection that's come out with this kind of theme. It's so bright and colorful and fun, very kid-core, and you know, it's a cute vibe all around. It's just not a theme that I'm personally drawn to, so I can't say I was super excited about this lineup, but individually the polishes were still amazing because they're ILNP. I think I would say my favorite is definitely Caterpillar, followed by Building Blocks because I do love a cute crelly, and while I normally don't love ILNP's crellies, like for whatever reason, their crelly or speckled finish polishes don't usually do it for me, which is kind of the case with Scribbles, unfortunately. Building Blocks I thought was so cute. It probably is those rainbow flakies. And then for the Brunch collection, I definitely like those a bit more. Like I would say that's probably my favorite release between the two of them if I'm only choosing one. I love the inspiration, the soft muted colors of them. You know, they're obviously really gorgeous formulas, but as you saw from my collection, I do already have a couple of shades that already give me very similar vibes, if not being like exact dupes. So, you know, it's kind of hard to be as excited for them, but I do love that ILNP is still filling out their catalog of their studio color line, which are their creams, crellies, and jellies. Although I know we got a lot of creams last year and we literally just got a quad from their Valentine's Day collection. So I'm curious to know how many people are going to be excited about more creams, but I did think they were really pretty overall. So yeah, the polishes again, you know, were great. I'm just a little lukewarm maybe on the theme specifically for the Playground set, but those are just my thoughts and I would love to hear yours down below so we can chat about it. But thank you so much for hanging out with me today. And again, a big thank you to ILNP for sponsoring this video. I hope you all have a great rest of your day and I will see you in the next one. Bye!